Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of I Didn't Sign Up for This. Carrie, what did we not sign up for this time?
Hey, Tim. I would like to talk about the difference in authority versus advisory. So let me just tell you that I have some mixed feelings about authority. I'm not rebellious in the sense that I rebel from authority figures. That's not who I am. I mean, I'm good with somebody who has the right to exercise that authority. But I think sometimes where it bleeds into that gray is when someone that I'm a peer with or one of my friends, and I'm talking more about personal relationships than work right now, but it probably applies to both. When someone takes the liberty of authority over me and tries to exercise that control over my actions versus advising. And so there's a difference in my opinion. And I'll tell you that the only people that I choose to give authority to over my life are people who maybe I work for, people who I ask their opinion. And so I'm turning to them and asking them to give me their opinion, which may actually fall into advisory, and we can talk about that. And my mom. I listen to what my mom says. I am a woman in her 40s who listens to her mother the majority of the time. And a lot of that's out of respect, and I may not carry through exactly the way she might see fit, but I look at her as an authority figure, and I look to her for that counseling and that guidance, and a lot of those conversations evolve with her taking that authoritative role. But how healthy is it to have an authoritarian who is your friend, who's constantly exercising authority over you? Are you really friends?
Well, I think you can, in fact, be friends with someone who is prone to exerting their authority over you or usurping your right to decide. I have people in my life like that as well. But you just have to be very clear, I think, with that person in interest of the friendship that you are a grown-up and that you don't need them to tell you how everything works all the time, especially if they're not particularly experienced in the areas wherein they're trying to impose their will or authority over you. But I wouldn't preclude the notion of friendship, right? You can still be friends. We're all friends here. But I think friends really explain to each other exactly how they feel about things too.
Right.
Friends are very candid with each other. True friends are. Or so maybe people like that need to be told that they have spinach between their teeth and they look ridiculous.
So let me ask you, okay, so that I think that's a good point. And I think that it's something that it's a very delicate situation. It's a very delicate topic. I have had friends in my past who took more of that authoritative role than really just kind of being there and being supportive and wanting to advise when I was asked. And so if I look at the comparison, an authoritative figure, when they're not given the authority, but yet they're trying to exercise authority over you, that is a control thing. They're looking to control. And I want to talk a little bit about projection on that piece. But before we do that, I want to look at the advisory. So the difference, in my opinion, is an authoritative person is going to come at you with what you should do, where an advisor is going to wait for you to come to them to share the advice that they have to give you. So if I have great friends, fortunately, that if I go to them and I say, hey, I have this dilemma in my life and I really need your help. I have a very good friend who absolutely can ground me in a conversation because they are much more grounded than I am. And so when my head's up in the clouds and I might be thinking more from an emotional perspective than a logical, I can go to that friend and they can calm me down in just a few minutes. On the flip side, I have friends who will proactively come at me with how they think I should live my life or how I should do certain things a certain way. And it's almost oppressive. And you get to a point where you start to close off. right? So you get to a point where you start to close off and you share less and less about yourself with those people because you don't want them to interject. You're not asking for advice on how to live your life. And if you are, then you want to go to someone like my other friend who can, ground you and help you see the big picture and the logic. And I go, okay, I can pull my head out of the clouds. Thank you. I was being over emotional or whatever. So in my opinion, those are the differences. But going back to authority, one of the biggest things that I see is it is very easy for me to tell you how to live your life, because the more I focus on how you should be living yours, the more I can avoid what I'm not willing to face in my own.
Okay. I can see that.
And I have seen that. I have probably done that. I can think of at least one relationship I had in my mid-20s where I was so focused on making him better. And I don't mean changing him, but helping him, because he was always miserable. Something was always wrong with him. And he had money issues and he had legal issues. And here I am, Captain Save-A-Ho or whatever the female equivalent is that, rushing in to save the day because I didn't have to deal with my own shit. I was busy dealing with his. And I realized later on that that's why he was in my life, because once I realized that I was projecting, the lesson was learned and he went away. And so it's interesting because, and we can even talk about the other side of that too. But I do think in a lot of cases, it's very easy for me to look at your life or look at someone's life objectively. That's why people hire a life coach. But I don't take authority over my clients' lives. I advise them. So they tell me what they want to do and we work through it together. The worst life coach you could have is someone who dictates how you should do what you need to do. Because then it's their plan, not your plan. And it falls apart. Anyway, what do you think?
Well, on that last point, I agree with you that if you want a long-term change or a long-term result in your life or relationship, your business, whatever, you do not necessarily want to be working with someone who dictates anything to you at all. But you have to have some reconciliation for the notion of confidence. Usually people who are struggling with changes in their life, work, relationship, business, divorce, somebody died, somebody's about to be born, whatever, they come to you as a coach looking for perspective, but also they want to just be told it's going to be okay. And here is a strategy or a plan to exercise to get you to where you want to be. Now, long term, they have to adopt that. But short term, they have to lean on you and your confidence in their ability to accomplish these goals. And so I don't really want to underestimate the value of what sounds in the early going like a dictatorial stance, because I oftentimes take a dictatorial stance. If we are going to work together, you are going to do this and you're going to do that. And you are, I dictate my terms in no uncertain terms. And if those terms are not met with, then that person simply cannot continue.
Well, and I agree with that. I agree with the accountability piece of it. Is that where you're kind of going with that?
Well, accountability comes in a little bit later, but in the early going, it is about leaning on someone else's confidence who does have that perspective that you're looking for. Perspective is the single most important thing that you can possibly gain from working with any level of outside consultant. As a matter of fact, you seek out an outside consultant because they have a completely different perspective on where you are and where you're coming from. But at the same time, that perspective oftentimes in the early going is in fact dictated to a person. And if that dictation is not met with, then you're probably talking to the wrong person.
Well, and I think that it has to, so the actions that, like, you can collaborate on the actions, but they have to resonate with the client. Because if they don't resonate with the client's not going to do it long term.
Well, and that's my point exactly.
Yeah.
The client will leave and go seek another solution. And that's exactly what I want to happen. In the world of business development, at very least, right? I'm not sure if it translates wholly straight across the board in terms of, relationships and sense of well-being and kind of the other things that we deal with. But on the business side, if you will not meet my demands, then you're just talking to the wrong person. And it's better for both of us if you go find a different person to talk to.
Well, right, because then they're just talking. They really, if they can't follow through with that action, but they're also hiring you to be the authority. They're hiring you to be the authority in that scenario. And really it goes hand in hand with advisory, because not only are you holding them accountable and being the authority and helping them chart out the path that they're going to take, whether it's business or personal, but you're also advising from an outsider's perspective with experience. You have experience that you're bringing to the table, that they're hiring you to be that expert. But you can't be the expert if you can't take some authoritative stance in that scenario. So I agree. It's completely like from a business perspective, and people that hire us to either life coach or corporate coaching or get my sales team on track or whatever it is that either one of us would potentially do. You're hiring me to be the authority. And so when I go in and I'm holding people accountable and I'm creating the actions with them that they need to take, and I'm holding them accountable, and if they fail to complete those actions, then I will say, we had a good run. I'll see you later. So I agree with you completely. I guess more or less I'm talking about the people who try to exercise that authority in your life when they really have no right to do so, and what that does to relationships.
Right, because that is a very common thing. But that, I think, goes hand in glove with the controlling archetype, the controlling personality type.
Right.
And I have found almost without fail that the person who demands and imposes and usurps authority and imposes control is a person who has very little faith in themselves or anyone else.
And that is an interesting point, because I had a conversation earlier this week with someone who was being very hard on a person in their lives that they felt they didn't want to really be associated with them anymore because of the fact that this person was very controlling and took that controlling way too far. And I told her, I said, chances are this person, although she's very critical of you and she's very critical of everybody else in her life, I would bet that ultimately she is more critical of herself than she is anybody else.
Right.
But she would never admit it, because admitting it would admit that she has no power.
Right.
And so the struggle and that internal conflict and the need to control actually comes from the feeling of being powerless. And that's scary, because you will lose friends. You will lose people that are important to you because you're so damn busy trying to control, because of this fear of not having that power, that you are realizing exactly what you're afraid of. You will have no power because there will be no people left to control.
Right.
But it is a certain personality type. It definitely is. And the majority of people with that personality type have very few friends, and it's unfortunate, but there is a way around it. I really think that there's a way to let that go, but it comes from introspection. You have to be able to look inside yourself and really not be critical, but objectively analyze where it's coming from.
Right.
Nobody can tell you that. So I agree that, the spinach in your teeth scenario, I think that's absolutely necessary if it is a situation that would cause less harm than it would good, if that makes sense. Because if you are sharing your perspective or your spinach is in your teeth and I'm not willing to hear it, then I will project that there's something wrong with you and not me.
Right.
Anyway, just some of my thoughts on the situation. I think I think it's interesting. I think it takes, all kinds of personalities to make the world go round. And none of us are perfect and we all have flaws, but I think it's definitely a good thing to visit both from a personal perspective and a business perspective, because it's something that we may have all done at some point.
Oh, absolutely. I think everyone has done that type of thing to some degree. I think almost, as I said earlier, almost without fail, it's a product of a lack of confidence in yourself or your situation that causes you to rush to the wheel and try to take over, as opposed to just having confidence in the captain of the ship who's a firm, steady hand on the wheel. He's fine. But because you don't know what's going on and you are afraid that you cannot control it, you crave control. And when I say you, I mean you and me and everybody in the world. We've all experienced this to some degree at some point in our lives. But, it begs the question, if you're in that spot, if you're in that space, how do you get out of it?
Well, you'd have to realize you were there first. And a lot of people that do this don't realize that they're there.
Okay, a lot of people that do this hide from the notion that they're there. When they lay down at night, they take a shower in the morning, whatever, they know where they are. We all know where we are. That's why I don't really feel sorry for people. When we've had this conversation before on a podcast a long time ago, I think people get exactly what they want. If you're not brave enough to want something more, you don't get something more. But everybody pretty well gets what they want. There are a handful of victims in the world, don't get me wrong. There are a handful of things that happen to people that they can't control that essentially victimizes them, and they have to overcome and recover. Some people recover immediately. Some people never recover. They carry a trauma or a problem or a slight, an insult with them all the days of their life. And I think that's kind of sad.
It is. That's no way to live. It's a very negative space.
It's a terrible space to be in. But if I, as your friend, am controlling, the overwhelming likelihood is that I am afraid that I'm going to lose you. I'm afraid. I'm creating scenarios in my mind, projecting myself into a possible future that is miserable and suffering while I'm there. But if I can just keep you on track as my friend, as opposed to looking inward, introspecting, then I feel like I'll be able to manage you, hold you, control you. Ultimately, that's what breaks friendships apart, though, because nobody wants to be held or controlled. Not after the 10th or 12th date, anyway.
You get further than I do. I run from that stuff.
Hold me and control me.
I'll tell you, though, it's funny because there are two things that will make me run from a relationship. And the first one is feeling like I'm being told what to do all the time. And the second one I haven't figured out yet. I'm just kidding. I'm totally playing.
That's like people who don't know what they're talking about and some other thing that I just don't know.
I just had to say it. No,
That's funny.
No one likes that. No one likes to be told what to do and how to do it and what they're doing wrong. And I think it's the criticism that comes along with it. And not even necessarily in a romantic relationship, but even in a platonic relationship, people avoid controlling people like the plague. They will appease them and they'll listen intently and validate them. And then they walk away and go, good gosh, thankfully I'm not like that. Thankfully I'm not like that person. And there's a whole part of life that you're missing out on because the truth is we have no control. It's unfortunate, but it's true. We have no control.
Well, in the macro, that's true. We have no control over the big stuff, right? I mean, and so that we focus on controlling things we can control. I can control 9 times out of 10. I can control when I go to bed at night, when I get up in the morning, if I work out or not, right? Little things I can control. And that leads you to a sense of self-confidence that maybe you're controlling bigger things. You hit a point, though, where you get into the macro and there are too many moving parts and there is no real control. Somebody could get hit by a bus tomorrow, struck by lightning. There's just too many moving parts to say you have control.
I think that a lot of times, aggressive intimidating, controlling, they're all very similar things. I've never met a person that had a need for control that wasn't aggressive or tried to be intimidating, or didn't try to be intimidating, I should say. And I think that it's interesting because we can look at the people that are controlling and we can say, don't do that. We can absolutely say, you know what, you shouldn't do that. And you know what you're doing, and you're going to bed at night, and you should feel guilty about the way that you are exercising dictatorship on people in your life. Okay, that's one side of it. But the true audience and the true discussion that we need to have is for everybody else that has to experience it. Because I have experienced it, and a lot of times it becomes a situation where you don't really know what to say or how to say it, and so you don't. And you just kind of withdraw and you just wait it out. You just wait for that storm to pass, and you realize that it's a conversation, or it's a day at work, or it's a night, or it's, it's a fleeting moment, and it doesn't change your reality. But how do you deal with those people? And there are probably situations and relationships out there where you're dealing with that person all the time, and you want to love that person. You want that person in your life, and you can't just walk away. And so you have to figure out how to handle that. And I think it's interesting because I started looking at different articles and different takes on things. And there are tons of articles on how to identify controlling people, but there are very few on how to actually handle them and the steps that you need to take, which I find interesting. One of the first things that you have to have in order to deal with those people and not let them impact you to the point that you're climbing the walls is you have to have enough confidence in yourself to know that that's their perspective and it's coming from a place of their experience. And you just have to maintain your composure and not get hooked. Not get hooked into the conversation, because then it turns into an argument,
Doesn't have to, though.
Tell me why.
Well, it's not even about the why, it's about the how, right? You use the following words. And so if you have somebody in your life like this, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I just jotted these words down, 6, 7, has about 10 or 12 words that will get you out of this situation every time. So take your beloved friend or loved one, significant other, parent, or, baddie grandma, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. And you take that person by the hand and you look them squarely in the eyes and you say, person, I love you too much to let you think that this is okay when you do whatever you do. And you explain it, right? I love you too much to let you think that this is how we're going to advance as a couple. That this is how we're going to remain friends into our golden years. That this is going to keep you in the will, right? I love you too much to let you think that on the day I die, when they read that will, that you're going to be in it if you keep doing this crap. I love you too much to let you think that, right? And I have used that very successfully for years. Over a decade. And it's just a technique. And I haven't found any holes in it yet. And so if you really want to affect change, and you know me, I'm Captain Practicality here. I'm like, rather than the hows and the whys, or rather than the what and the why, and understanding the driver and the underlying blah, 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 that's great. And that's very important if you don't have a turnkey solution, which I do in this catchphrase, I believe. Right? Because it's been so effective for me. I love you too much to let you think that behaving this way is going to allow us to continue as friends. Because it won't. If you keep controlling my life, I will push away from you. Because I've got to save myself. And then they can try to start a fight. And you come back to, well, that's not how I see it. That's not my perspective. And I love you too much to allow you to think that that's how I feel. You're making assumptions on how I feel, right? And no matter how many times they come back, you can still go back to, no, I love you too much I respect you too much. I want you in my life too much to allow you to continue down this path, whatever it is.
One thing that I think is important to remember is, and I think that, so here's the thing, that is an ideal approach, number one. And the reason it's an ideal approach is you are sharing how you feel in a way that doesn't put the listening party on the defense, right? And that's a key to communication. So it makes sense that would work. You also have the right to walk away at any time.
Yeah, you do.
You know, I mean, you do, which is easier said than done. And, you know, not everybody wants to throw in a towel on time spent, but you do have the right to walk away. You have the right to have a different experience and a different reality and even a different perception than anyone else, because this is your life and it is what you create. And so you don't necessarily have to live under the guidelines of anybody else's authority unless it's your mom. Anyway.
Yeah. All bets are off when it's your mama.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep. I love you, mama.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'll be honest. I'm pretty lucky. I have a fantastic mom. I don't have a mom that tries to tell me how to live my life. She will consult me from her perspective, but she has never once told me that this is how it was going to be after I aged past about 22.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So
yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. So
that sounds about right.
Yeah. So but there are relationships that we have out there where we're constantly looking for that approval. And that has to come from within you. I would even venture to say that a lot of times if you're missing confidence in a certain area of your life, those people can enter into your life who will try to take that authoritative role because of the lack of confidence that you have in that area. And it's difficult because when your confidence increases and they're still that same person and you're looking at them and what worked 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago doesn't work today because you have evolved as a person, but they're still struggling for that control. You just see it more clearly than you did before. And so it is a constant evolution and you have to be able to grow together or you grow apart. I mean, I have friends that I truly thought would be in my life for my entire life that have disappeared, that I have not talked to in years. And to this day, there are a couple of them I have no clue what happened at all. And so it was, but people, my point is regardless, there was no dramatic fight. There was no dramatic situation. People just drift apart. And it is a lot easier to drift away from someone who tries to control you than someone who tries to advise you when you need the advisement.
Well, and so the trick becomes determining really what and where you are in someone else's life. It's that old adage of the mailman that I tell the kids all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, well, I'll just share it with you. I'll just bore you with it. I told it to you before, but I'll bore it with for the sake of the listener.
Okay.
So imagine you're driving down the road, right? You fail to come to a complete stop, making a right-hand turn at a stop sign. You get up to the next stop sign, and you notice a blue and white vehicle with flashing lights in your rearview mirror. So the car stopped. The blue and white vehicle behind you stops with its flashing lights, and a uniformed person gets out of that vehicle. And that person in their crisp uniform walks up to the driver's side window of your vehicle. You roll the window down, obviously, to see what they want, where they inform you that you have failed to make a complete stop at a stop sign, and they are now going to write you a ticket. Whereupon they pull out their certified mail receipt book, okay, and scribble out some semblance of a ticket, right? Because as it turns out, this uniformed person is in fact a letter carrier. This is a mailman, right? And the mailman just says, hey, you better stop next time. Here you go. I think it'll be, I don't know, $50 cash right now. Do you pay that ticket?
No, I'm going to say no.
Okay. You don't pay the ticket. This is true. You might call a psych ward, right? But you're not going to pay a ticket. All right. So now, with a few simple changes, the uniform has a badge on it. The flashing lights are not yellow caution lights because I'm making frequent stops, but rather red and blue lights to indicate I'm an emergency vehicle, a police officer. He gets up and he writes you a ticket. Do you pay that one?
Yes.
Absolutely you do.
Mm-hmm.
Because he has the authority over you to impose his will upon you. He can deprive you of your time, deprive you of your property, should you not follow up with the edicts of the local law and local policy and the demands of the justice system. So if you don't do your part, once he makes that demand, he can make your life very difficult, including take your freedom away for a period of time. Right? He has a lot of power. He has a lot of authority, right? What the mailman or the letter carrier person can do is basically just bring you a letter. He can deliver a message, right? And so you have to know what position you hold in a given person's life. I mean, if you have a series of employees that are reporting directly to you, it is incumbent upon you to hold them accountable to the plan that you have laid out for them or that you have established together, right?
Right.
And so you don't come to them in an advisory role. You don't deliver a message. You come to them and you say, hey, did you get your numbers last week? Did you make the requisite number of sales calls? Did you make the requisite number of dials or attempts if you're selling stuff over the phone? That's the first thing that comes to mind because I've been in that business for a long time, even though it's dying. But, and so if I'm managing someone's efforts, I am holding them accountable, and I'm doing so with authority. I don't come to them and say, have you ever thought about, maybe doing your job? Just an idea. You don't have to, but that's just the first thing that occurs to me is maybe you ought to go through the motions of doing what you get paid to do, right? Mm-hmm. Although, from a very sort of smart-ass standpoint, that does sound like something I might say.
No way.
If you apply that sarcastic filter, and that sounds exactly like something I would say. Not really, though, right? Like in a very serious situation like that. Like I remember having a conversation like that with people over the years and just be like, yeah, man, you obviously are not cut out for this job because you're not doing the behaviors requisite to be successful in the job. And that is an authoritarian position, and it sucks a lot of times, right?
Right.
I have hired just a handful more people than I have fired in my career, okay?
Gotcha.
Most people don't work out for whatever it is. Most people are not a great fit. And so holding that authoritarian role, authoritarian position, it's not a lot of fun, but it is necessary in order to accomplish certain things, especially if you are in the role. Now, if you're the mail person, you're delivering a message, i.e., I'm sitting around the big table of, sales strategists in a given company, and I'm not the authority, I'm a peer, then I'm not telling them what to do with their salespeople or their direct reports in a given organization because I'm just delivering a message. I go, you know what has worked for me? I have tried this. Maybe you should consider that. Whereas when I'm dealing with someone that I have authority over, I'm just like, you know what absolutely we do in this company? We do this, A, B, C, and D. And if you're not doing it, then you really need to be brushing up that resume because you're not long for this job. But it's establishing who you are in someone's life. And a lot of times people get confused. A lot of times people will take an authoritarian position in one element or aspect of their lives and translate it over to an authoritarian position in another aspect, right? And in order to maintain a healthy friendship, it is incumbent upon you as the friend to share with that person that I love you too much to continue like this. If you keep telling me where we're going to go and what we're going to do and, keep making these demands on my time, I'm going to start to resent you. And so then if I start to resent you, I've got two choices. I can passively, aggressively ignore your calls. We will fail to spend time together as friends because I struggle to be around you. Or I could be a true friend, sit down right here, right now and say, look, let me just ladle up a big hot bowl of this is how it is, right? I'm not going to continue to do this if you are going to continue to do that. And I love you too much to see this go down in flames. I would rather be friends and part as friends than to just continue down this road where I'm going to secretly loathe spending time with you.
Well, that makes sense. And that's probably it's the most healthy and direct approach that because if there is no impact and there is no change, then chances are the friendship will dissolve anyway, or the relationship or whatever you're in.
Right.
A lot of times in the work environment, when there are peers that don't get along, it's because one has tried to tell the other person how to do their job without the authority. And I worked with a girl years ago who did that. I remember, gosh, it's been over 20 years. But I remember that I was learning the job, and she was maybe had a month more tenure than I did. And I would deal with a client or deal with a customer, and she would pay attention to how I did that and come over and tell me where I needed to course correct at any given time if she felt like she knew something that I didn't know. I could not stand this poor girl because she needed to focus on her job and let me do mine. And that's part of when you try to take the authority, but you don't really have it.
Right.
You don't have it, and you're giving advice when advice wasn't asked for.
It's I call it the Barney Fife complex, right? Where it's just like, you know what? You have no idea how big a buffoon you look like right now. Like, interestingly enough, I was just having this conversation with Annie, Manny's my 16-year-old daughter who is in high school. And for the last, 4 or 5 months, maybe, she's been working at a grocery store. Just, 10, 15 hours a week, pick up a little bit of extra money. So after working for months and months at the grocery store, she and her mom take a vacation to Australia for a couple of weeks. Well, while she was gone in that couple of weeks, as the grocery store is ramping up for the summer season, they hired another girl who is now Annie's peer, who has essentially the same job that she has, right? Mm-hmm. So that girl has been there maybe a week or 10 days and never laid eyes on Annie at all because Annie's been in Australia for 2 weeks. So she gets back, starts doing her job, and this little girl comes up to her and decides that she must be brand new, right?
Oh no.
And with all of 10 days experience, takes it upon herself to start training Annie on what the job is and how you do it, right? Tell her this is what we do, and this is where the mop bucket is, and this is where you dump it, and this is where just on and on, just like all of this crap about like how to do her job. That, granted, she hasn't been there 20 years, but she's been there, half a year. She's been there almost 6 months. And same type of situation, though. It's that person who is lacking in confidence, number one, that makes these bold assumptions, and number two, feels like they cannot be the low man on the totem pole. And so they take any opportunity to position themselves in authority above almost anyone else. But that is purely just a lack of self-confidence. That is a person who needs your help and guidance. Anybody who comes up and gives you completely unsolicited advice on something that they, by all appearances, have absolutely no experience in, is begging for advice. They're begging for acceptance. They don't know what they're talking about, and they want to figure out what they're talking about, And so, the advice I gave to her was, that's interesting. Before I went on vacation to Australia, we didn't dump the mop water right there. We dumped it right here where I'm dumping it. And just let it come to the front that she's been there for, these 5 or 6 months. Just to let that girl off the hook so that she realizes she's the court jester. Right? I mean, that's the worst thing. When you're the buffoon and you don't know you're the buffoon, right?
Right.
They love me. They think I'm the best ad hoc impromptu leader ever. No, they're laughing at you, right?
These are my people. Let them eat cake.
Let them eat cake. I love it.
So let me ask you this. In all honesty and in all fairness, how in the world do we know if we're control freaks or not? How do we know if we have that overbearing personality? Because there are so many people out there. We know we're insecure. We're all insecure. Chances are you have an insecurity somewhere. Maybe it's hidden under your pillow.
Oh, sure.
Maybe it is facing you in the mirror every day. You never know. But I found an interesting article, and it does have 8 signs that you're insecure. 8 signs you're a control freak. And I think it's interesting. Because it all talks about like your need to micromanage others, your need to change others. If they would just do it your way, they would be a better person.
Right.
I have to read this one. You offer constructive criticism as a veiled attempt to advance your own agenda.
There you go.
You know you're a control freak when.
There you go.
And so it's really interesting but how do we know? I mean, I know my personality, and I definitely have a rise to the top, do it, get it done personality. But on the flip side of that, I'm more forgiving with everyone else in my life than I am with myself. Yeah. I don't hold anybody to a certain standard because everybody should have their own experience. Everybody has the right to create the life that they want, the way that they see fit, and to live outside of doing harm to other people should be able to live free and be able to do what they want to do to make them happy. So
I agree.
I don't project my need to make sure that I have a process and I control my actions. I don't project that onto other people. But where does that line, where's that line drawn in the sand for people? What's the difference in where I stop and other people continue forward and they don't understand they're doing it?
Well, I think anything that you ever want out of life is inexorably linked to the notion of compromise. And so there is give and take in absolutely anything. A lot of people like to consider themselves right and resolute and devout, when in fact, you can't function on the planet devoid of compromise, which means you've got to constantly be looking at that situation with a compromising eye. You've got to constantly look and get feedback from others. I mean, some people just really lack social intelligence or emotional intelligence, I should say. And those people, it's going to be really difficult because they're not reading your cues, your signs. They're not reading your tells. And those people are really hard to get along with oftentimes, very hard to communicate with. But the overwhelming majority of people look at that furrowed brow and go, what? What is it? Right? What's wrong? What's going on? Give me some feedback. They can take the subtle cues that open the compromise conversations. And so as long as you're just willing to always live with a compassion and put yourself in the shoes of somebody else, be able to look at the world from their perspective and say, I can understand how you might feel that way, then it'll take care of itself. It's a self-regulating system.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the best examples that I have of an advisory or an advisor in my life is my best friend from high school. We've known each other since 8th grade, and we are so different, but yet so supportive of each other. And there are so many times, even recently, this woman knows everything about me. So She absolutely knows everything about me. But there are times where I have called her to talk through something and been very hard on myself, and she has stopped me and helped me see it from a different perspective. She didn't enforce a different perspective, but she gave me a different approach and allowed me to see it and was there to talk through it. Never once did she interfere with my decisions or interfere with my need to do something. She just absolutely was there to listen and give that advice when I asked for it. And like I said, I've known her since 8th grade. And I do the same for her. That is a healthy relationship. When you can actually sit back and have a relationship with someone and they don't enforce their perspective, but they help you see a different perspective for yourself, that is a true advisor.
Yeah, it is. Well, and you can recognize that person because they're using that Socratic methodology of just continuing to ask revealing questions, as opposed to what I would refer to as a Napoleonic methodology, which just gives you a series of dictates. And so anytime somebody's sitting before you going, and oftentimes it can be veiled. Oftentimes it can be, I want you to be happy, so I really think we should go do what I want to do, right? I mean, that's what it boils down to. But that's a Napoleonic dictate in my estimation. That is, I will have what I want. As opposed to Socratic, which is to say, especially when you're being hard on yourself, tell me why you feel that way. What exactly did you do? How did you engender this self-loathing over this topic or subject matter? And you just keep exploring through question after question after question, allowing people to come to their own conclusion. Number one, oftentimes they come to the conclusion that you have already come to. And so they tend to be a relatively rhetorical questions as a set, Mm-hmm. I mean, they're not individually rhetorical questions, but the whole set is to show somebody that, hey, you're really not Ted Bundy, right? You're okay. You're not Jeffrey Dahmer, as it turns out. You're all right. You didn't actually eat the human flesh, right? Right? And so, yeah, it's just a matter of taking people through that series of questions. One is a legitimate desire for understanding, and two is the ability to give them insight as to exactly why they're being so hard on themselves. And because oftentimes when you really look at it, you kind of pull back the covers, you realize that there's no reason to be hard on yourself.
True.
If everyone else is worthy of your forgiveness, then certainly you are as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We all are. We walk around every day, all day long, on the same rock, reeling through space, and yet we try to protect ourselves from being vulnerable or showing any kind of weakness at all. When the truth is that human connection comes from compromise and the vulnerability that we actually possess.
That's right. Those are the people that we actually are drawn to and love and respect. It's the authentic people.
Absolutely.
We've been dealing with the antithesis for so long. It occurred to me, honestly, the same notion occurred to me not 2 weeks ago. I am watching the news and I notice on this very highly tuned, high definition television that I can see the strokes in the makeup on Shepard Smith's face, right? Like I literally, it's the definition is so high. It's great for sports, terrible for movies, this television. I can see the strokes from the makeup artist's brush on his rosy cheeks and his perfectly coiffed hair and his tie and tie pin, his striped shirt, his navy blazer, the perfect makeup, the perfectly white teeth, the perfect lights, as he rhythmically, methodically, almost hypnotically reads the news off of that teleprompter. And there is this thing inside me that just says, horse pucky, I don't believe a word this guy says. It's a load of crap because we crave authenticity. And what's given us authenticity, honestly, as much crap as there is in the world of YouTube and Vimeo and all of the video hosting sites, YouTube's the biggest one, obviously. I think you could probably get rid of 98% of everything on YouTube and still have more videos than you could watch in a lifetime. So I'm not necessarily defending the quality television on YouTube, right? That's some good television right there. It's not, right? Some of it is. A lot of it's not. The thing that makes it so refreshing is I believe the person creating that video believes what they're saying. They stutter, but they stutter a little bit. They stammer a little bit. They think about what they want to say. They communicate it in a way that's not just this like perfectly coiffed, perfectly smooth delivery time and time again, because it feels like we're just being lied to.
Well, I agree. That's one thing that I am very thankful for, but it's led to some pretty comical stuff. But I'll give you an example. So if I am in a grocery store or if I'm in any kind of store and I see, I tend to speak the truth and say it without reservation. Okay. So that doesn't mean I don't have a filter. I'm not abrasive. I'm very kind. Like, I was in Sprouts grocery store a couple weeks ago.
Right.
And I'm walking down the aisle. I'm looking for something. And I'm walking down the aisle and this older lady comes down the same aisle. She's coming to the end of the aisle as I'm getting ready to go down the same aisle. And she has on, her hair's done. She has on beautiful makeup. She's wearing this beautiful knit dress or knit shirt and a skirt. And she looks so nice. And without even hesitating, I looked at her and I said, "You look so pretty today." And she went from reserved, her shoulders relaxed. She got this beautiful smile that just radiated the beauty in this woman's face, even more so. And she smiled at me and she said, "Thank you, dear. So do you." Because she didn't know what to say. And I'm like, I had just gone to the float spa and I had no makeup on. So I know she was lying.
So you're like covered in salt. You're like, yeah, that's funny.
But it was so funny because in that moment when I want to pay someone a compliment, like I truly love people. I have my entire life. When I was 3 years old, my parents went on a vacation to, I think it was Myrtle Beach. I don't remember because I was 3. And I was in the campsite. I remember a couple of different things about this vacation. So I was probably almost 4. But my mom, we had this great hot dog maker. But we were at the campsite and my mom, everybody kept passing by our campsite and saying, "Hey, Carrie." And my mom said she thought to herself, how in the world do all of these women know my daughter? And she figured it out later the next day when she was in the restroom and I was standing at the door. And I would stand at the door and say, "Hey, my name's Carrie. What's your name?" to every woman that came through the door. Because I genuinely, my entire life, I have absolutely loved people. So when I saw that woman and the first thing I thought to myself was, "You look so pretty," I didn't hesitate to say it because I wanted her to feel beautiful and embrace that moment and realize that someone noticed all of the effort that she put into getting ready that morning to go to Sprouts to do her grocery shopping. I'm not special. Like everybody has those thoughts, but how many people stop to share them? How many people stop to do that to make other people feel good about themselves?
I think very few, because people are deluded into thinking that this is a competitive experience instead of a collaborative experience. People are led to believe through how everything from sports to military politics, the media, it's all about winners and losers, competition. When in fact, when you get right down to the base human level, this entire experience is about collaboration. It's about that rising tide that lifts all ships that John F. Kennedy talked about in his run for the presidency, successful bid for the presidency. I don't know if you've heard, but he won a few years back. Yeah, it didn't work out so well.
Got that.
Hopefully it hasn't been too soon. I don't want to make light of a tragic situation. Too soon. Too soon to talk about. At any rate, people think that they have to compete. And so I dare say a large percentage of the population wearing your shoes, walking into that store, see that woman, and rather than go, "Oh, you look so beautiful today. You look so pretty today," they go, "Oh, she looks really pretty today. I wonder who the hell she thinks she is. She's all dolled up to go to Sprouts. She thinks she's better than me." And it's because we have that competitive streak, that competitive nature. I mean, there is room for competition in a society, don't get me wrong, right? But if you will lend yourself to the notion of collaboration first, you will accomplish more, have more friends, influence more people, build your own life up dramatically. It's the old Zig Ziglar line, right? To get what you want, you have to help enough other people get what they want.
Right.
And that's how it works. And I really, truly agree with that.
Well, and we all want acceptance and we all want to be loved. I think the biggest issue that we have is loving ourselves first. We're looking for that love from external sources, but we have to have it internal as well. And if you can get to that point, collaboration is your first go-to. We are all human beings doing the best that we can on this rock together. And if we don't start working together, it's just going to get worse. So my challenge to everyone listening, the next time you see someone that has made an effort or that looks beautiful or is kind or has a nice smile, don't hesitate to say it. Make that person's day. So worth it.
Excellent.
So worth it.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. So collaborate.
And listen.
Well, excellent. Good talk. Remember today our sage advice.
As always.
As always. I wasn't going to say as always this time because I always say it. Which precludes as always, right? It's something about the opposition to authority. I don't always say it. Just because I always say it. Anyway, sorry for the tangent. Dream your life.
And live your dreams.
Live your dreams.
Everyone live your dreams.
All right.
You get a dream and you get a dream and you get a dream.
We're going to be goofy on our own time. Thanks for listening in.
Yes.
And we'll be back in a couple days with another one.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.